Hey guys, this is God of Politics and welcome back to a brand new video. But before I get started with this video, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also join the Discord that is linked down in the description. But in today's video, we are going to be talking about some decisions that have been made by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is becoming increasingly conservative as a result of the two judges that President Trump has appointed. And it's going to be very important in the future because after this election, there's likely going to be two new openings for Supreme Court vacancies sometime in the near future. If Donald Trump wins, that will push the courts really far to the conservatives, and it will make it effectively a 7-2 court, which makes it effectively that Democrats and liberals will not get anything they want. If Joe Biden were to win, it would keep the court in effectively a 5-4 majority for the conservatives, with John Roberts as kind of the swing vote. But actually what we'll be talking about today is some very interesting rulings. The most important one, the one that's getting the most news, is this headline by the New York Times: Civil rights law protects gay and transgender workers, Supreme Court says. So it says the court said the language of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits sex discrimination, applies to discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. So this is actually quite an interesting thing. So it's basing it off of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which is a landmark bill. It's one of the bills that's attributed to giving black people especially many of the rights that they deserved and they did not get after slavery during Reconstruction. So that's what they got in 1964. And now the Supreme Court has effectively extended that. They've extended that to gay and transgender people as well. Their reasoning is that, back in 1964, these kind of concepts of doing these things did not really exist in the same way they do now, so that it would you stretch out to those people as well. It says the vote was 6-3, with Justice Neil M. Gorsuch writing the majority opinion. He was joined by Chief Justice John G. Roberts, with obviously the liberal justices Ginsburg, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan, and Breyer as well. So this is actually quite another interesting thing too. Neil Gorsuch is the first judge appointed by Donald Trump. Many people think he's probably more conservative than Kavanaugh is, but this is actually quite an interesting thing because John Roberts, he's been a swing vote, but he was appointed by a Republican. He sided with the liberals in this case. Neil Gorsuch also sided with the liberals, which was quite unexpected, whether this is just a one-time case thing or whether this is a sign of something, bigger, that John Roberts isn't as conservative as some people think he is. It says the case concerned Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which bars employment discrimination based on race, religion, national origin, and sex. The question was for the justices was whether that last prohibition, discrimination because of sex, applies to many millions of gay and transgender workers. And according to the ruling, it does. It says the decision covering two cases was the court's first ruling on LGBT rights since the retirement in 2018 of Justice Anthony Kennedy, which he was replaced by Gorsuch, who wrote the majority opinions in all four of the court's major gay rights decisions here. And so obviously, these policies have heavy support amongst all people. Even amongst Republicans, 74% of people think it should be illegal to fire employees based on sexual orientation. Overall, that number is 83%, with 90% of Democrats supporting it. So this is another one of those things, similar to a lot of gun rights things, which we'll talk about in a second, where the vast majority of the public supports these measures that just hasn't been put in place yet. And so it seems as if it's going to be put in place now because of this ruling by the Supreme Court. Opponents to it say that it's another example of the courts, legislating, saying things that weren't in the original law here. And so, it's just quite a landmark case, and it's a very important case that will be covered a lot on the news here. This will be covered in most cases, but I'd like to get to a couple more decisions that the Supreme Court made. The first one is that the Supreme Court has refused to hear new challenge to gun restrictions. So a lot of people in the NRA and other gun lobbyist groups have been trying to get cases about gun rights to the Supreme Court now that the court is more conservative here. And, the Supreme Court ruled the other case moot, as it says down here, the New York City gun restrictions, because they were rescinded while the case was pending. The court turned away all potential replacements that would have given its conservative justices a chance to strengthen the Second Amendment here. So this is another example where the court has denied to actually hear the case, meaning that it's actually more of a blow to Second Amendment advocates, because a lot of the gun control measures are still going to be allowed and aren't going to be challenged because the court is not taking it up. It says the justices had a long list of challenges to choose from, including several testing the threshold issues of whether guns can be carried in public nationwide, as they currently are in some 40 states. Other issues including bans on assault weapons, high-capacity magazines, and handgun sales. By refusing to take a new case so quickly after declaring the New York City case moot, the justices denied gun rights groups such as the National Rifle Association, the NRA, what they have been seeking, an opportunity to put state and local limits before an increasingly conservative court. It says Associate Justices Clarence Thomas and Brett Kavanaugh dissented from the decision not to hear the major New Jersey case testing the right to carry guns in public. Quote, in several jurisdictions throughout the country, law-abiding citizens have been barred from exercising the fundamental right to bear arms because they cannot show that they have a, quote, justifiable need or, quote, good reason for doing so, Thomas wrote. One would think that such an onerous burden on a fundamental right would warrant this court's review. So this is kind of dividing the court up again, but that's what we all expect. And it's basically saying that this is kind of more of a delaying thing rather than stopping a victory for the conservatives. I do think conservatives will get their day in court in terms of a Second Amendment case, and it will go in their favor. It only takes one case with John Roberts to side with the conservatives for it to be a conservative win here. That is not happening yet. That is going to be delayed. Obviously, if Donald Trump wins and they get a 7-2 court, that things like that will happen all the time. But it is not happening right now. They have decided not to hear this court case. This probably won't get as much attention, but it is very important as well here. The next one, the Supreme Court, this one is not as important, but it is still, I think it's necessary to talk about. Supreme Court removes hurdle for $8 billion Atlantic Coast Pipeline. So basically, the Supreme Court's removed a legal barrier to the construction of an $8 billion pipeline that would deliver natural gas from West Virginia, ruling the project could run under a major East Coast hiking trail. The court, in a 7-2 opinion by Justice Clarence Thomas on Monday, overturned a lower court ruling that found the U.S. Force didn't have the authority to grant a special use permit that allowed developers of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline to construct an underground segment beneath the section of the Atlantic National Scenic Trail in Virginia here. So this is basically saying that, the pipeline can be built even if the government's saying that they can't do it here. And so this is basically the pipeline that's being allowed to be built. This isn't, as big of news, but it's kind of a blow to, I guess you could say, environmentalists who argue that the pipeline's path could harm ecologically important national forests with threats of soil erosion and damage to wildlife habitat. They said the project would harm an especially picturesque section of the Appalachian Trail in Virginia, located near Reed's Gap from Wintergreen Resort. The trail runs more than 2,000 miles from Maine to Georgia here. So this is quite an interesting ruling here, and especially since it's a 7-2 ruling, it's a blow to some people on the liberal side who think that they should not be building pipelines in some of these areas because they may break or things like that. But it seems as if that's going to go ahead. And then the final one, which is also very, very important, is that the Supreme Court won't hear challenge to California's sanctuary city law. This is less of a delay to a win for conservatives and more, the conservatives aren't going to get a win for this, and neither is Donald Trump here. Donald Trump is not going to get a win from this because the Trump administration was trying to challenge the California law that basically distance the local law enforcement from illegal immigrants and law enforcement from the federal government with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. So basically, it gives the states a lot more power to do things, especially in terms of in terms of sanctuary cities, things like that. So Justice Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito, two of the court's conservative members, supported taking up the case. The law and others like it have ignited a firestorm between the federal government, which has made immigration enforcement a top priority, and some states that say they are within their rights to determine how best to use their own resources. It says during the State of the Union speech, Trump called the California effort an outrageous law here. So this is a blow to the Trump administration here because it asked the court to take up this case and rule in favor of him and against California, kind of, to get more illegal immigrants out of the country and give the federal government more power to take those illegal immigrants out of the country. But this is yet another blow to the conservatives today. And, this is a very good day for liberals in a court that is becoming increasingly conservative. A lot of this is more of a delay rather than a stoppage of what conservatives want. But we'll just have to see how important these things become in the future. Many of these laws, like the immigration law, is kind of, it's just a one-time thing. The sanctuary cities laws, it gives a lot more power to the states in this sense. As for the gun rights laws, it's more of a delay of what is the inevitable, which is with a conservative court, you're going to have a good case for them in terms of Second Amendment rights. As for the civil rights law, that is the landmark case. That is a big case. That is why I talked about it first. That is why it's the most important. That's why it's going to be on the news the most. And because it is a very important case. Some people do disagree with the opinion, but it is a very important case here. And so I just wanted to talk about those 4 opinions and those 4 decisions, whatever you want to call it. I thought that would be quite interesting to talk about today because it is quite big news. So thank you all for watching this video. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also join the Discord that is linked down in the description. So thank you all for watching, guys, and I will see you guys later.